And let me, I get it right, yes, that.
Driving.
Yeah, so, all right, we're recording. I can't get us live on here for whatever reason, but we are recording, so.
We are recording.
Yeah, it's recording is live. We all do that way.
I'm going to call the meeting to order. It's the Police Commission meeting, June 13th, 7:08 p.m. We have in attendance Stephen Ford, Tara Fitzpatrick, Cindy Sanchez, and of course Chief DeCasey is joining us today too. We'll start with the agenda. I believe everyone received a copy of the minutes from May. Haley is our new secretary. She did an excellent job. Anyone move to approve the minutes? I second. All in favor? Aye. All opposed?
Haley not with us tonight.
Haley had a family emergency. It was Karen and Janice could not be with us also. And why skip this up and we approve of today's agenda?
I make a motion to approve of today's agenda.
Any second? All in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? Approve of today's agenda. We'll start. Anyone have any announcements?
I have a couple. First is the monthly conversation with police on Wednesday, June 21st at 6 o'clock. Our summer firearms preventive tactics training cycle begins this month. I think I sent you all an email with dates, but not I'll double check and not follow up here. 19th, 27th, 28th, all more than 1 to 10. There's a day training. And we should be done at 5 p.m. on each of those dates. Want to thank Janice and the Master Technicians. They hosted us for the January conversation with police. And that meeting, there was a request to have the officers attend again with some congregation. And that happened on June 9th. And just want to thank them again for hosting us for that. So a few officers, Destiny and Childs, attended that. Sounded very well received. So thank Janice and the congregation for that. And also wanted to thank the museum school for asking us to participate in their community tours. The first responders, special squad fire department, and police department on May 31st and June 1st. We had vehicles and things set up at the fire station for the kids to go around the bus and take a community tour. And so we stopped up there and it was fun. We also had a good time. The kids had a good time. So and that's all I have for announcements.
Does anyone here in the public have any public input?
I'd like to. Good evening, Edgar Rodriguez from the Default Coalition for Community Safety and Wellbeing. I'm going to stay within 3 minutes. And first, thank you for the wide-ranging conversation that you had last month here. I thought it was excellent. I don't expect a repeat tonight of that, so I'm going to limit myself to 3 minutes. And that was between the police commission and the public. I wanted to ask if you are considering, and you don't have to answer this now in public, when you get a chance, whether you are still considering having a second public input at the end of the evening, which allows the public to react to whatever is being discussed that evening, instead of waiting a whole month later to try and provide input. We ask also that if you can acknowledge formally some of the things that you have been getting from us, we would appreciate it very much. And are you considering any of the things that Tom Jelliff submitted in his email of just recently of June 12th, 23, 5:51 p.m. And that's the extent of my comments. There's one more thing I'd like to do. What we're working towards is a change of paradigm of thinking on your part. And that's why we submitted so much written documents to you. And there's one document that I'd like to give to you tonight that you have, but you have it in black and white. And I want to submit it in color to you, and then make a couple of comments on it quickly. Yeah.
Breaking trees, man, come on, resources.
It's necessary for survival and good well-being. This is real quick. I think I can do it in a minute. So this is a summary of the reports that we've gotten from us, all of 19 pages long, whatever it is. So it's a model for reimagining community safety and well-being. Why reimagine community safety and policing? So we're shifting away from just focusing on policing and training of policing, and broadening the idea of the safety and well-being of the community of New Paltz. So on the left, in the kind of gold box, you have unpacking the term violence. The term violence is not just about police brutality. We go beyond that. We're concerned about the violence that exists within the community that needs to be addressed also. Research shows that violence includes interpersonal violence, self-harm like substance abuse and suicide, systemic harm by an unequal society, symbolic harm by silencing of those in the margins. And the blue box now, our reaction is overuse of law enforcement in New Paltz. We have low crime rate, high ratio of officers to residents, police mostly used for property surveillance. This may be wrong. This is from 2 years ago, and this may not be accurate. Police used for inappropriate functions like checking on the elderly and the ill, reports of racism and aggressive policing. In the green box, real quickly, it's for the benefit of the public. It's for the benefit of the public. Police reform has not been shown to work in reducing police violence. And our position is that diversity in training is not very effective in general. That body cameras usually do not stop violence. More police training is not efficacious. Employing local police of color is not successful at reducing racism and violence. However, I'd like to congratulate you tonight to appoint what I assume are two Hispanics. They have Hispanic names, and I hope that they speak Spanish. And we need that in our community because of the increasing number of immigrants. And then our position is that we're more concerned with accountability. That's why you have that box on the left. And this is where you come in. Independent community oversight of police, civilian review board of power, community advisory board, transparent and justice focus on collective bargaining agreement, that you get involved with collective bargaining, police department operational transparency in officer conduct issues. And then divestment, which is the great controversy that we have, is that we have been arguing that the police budget should be reduced. Why? Because we have other needs in the community that we service. For example, the Child Care Day Center disappeared, was torn down by the town board that was next to New Paltz. We consider that a need of the community. We believe that more money should go into the center, the teenage center that we have in town, the youth center, Fields of Dreams, to the work that Phoenix is doing in community thriving. And that's where we say that should all be reinvested into things that support the community, crisis intervention, social work, youth, children, restorative justice. And then our job is an ongoing community advocacy. That's why you see us here over meetings. This is why we write to you. We go to conversations with police, and we're constantly trying to engage the community with you and the police department. Thank you. That's a synopsis, kind of a model, a quick view of everything that we kind of have written up and hope that this presents a different way of flushing. This may be revised in the coming year,
Okay.
because we've learned. Thank you for the extended time. I think you gave me about a couple more minutes.
And I just want to acknowledge that I have gotten materials from Edgar in looking at some of the reform paperwork. So I just wanted to
Thank
acknowledge
you.
that I did get it and I have been digesting it.
We were hoping that if we sent something in writing, that we at least get an acknowledgement that you got it, whether you read it or not is something else, but at least we know that you're getting it. And our interest is, are you really considering any of the things that we're suggesting? And, we're very research oriented and we write things up and we're systematic about it. It would be good to know if you're considering. If you have questions, we'd be more than glad to
I
discuss
have
this.
a bunch of questions I'll write to you.
I can do an individual session, we can do it in public, but
I'll write them first and then if I feel we need
it's
it.
a little
I'll
loud.
write them first and then when I see the response, I'll see if we can.
Now, but we get any kind of communication, sign language, or email,
We can do it in Spanish, so I
or
don't.
in Spanish,
And I would say I appreciate you offered to bring me a hard copy, but
Okay,
I was trying to say, the truth.
Thank you.
I did receive it,
Thank you.
and I vowed that I received it, but, and
okay, good, thank you.
the digital form is fine. We did, I don't know, he sent, I think he sent it to everyone, a letter from Tom Zeller. So, when someone sends a letter, do we get to read it on the record, or can we put it as part of the,
Knowledge that we receive.
I think he asked that it be included with the minutes.
with the minutes, that's it, okay.
So
That's
I need to make a motion for that since it is public input. I'll make a
You want to
motion.
make a motion?
I'll make a motion that Tom Gillips input for June 13th to the police commission be accepted as part of the permanent record.
One second,
What's that?
favor?
Yay!
Okay. Any other comments?
No, thank you.
All right, next on the agenda, we have the review, revise, New Falls Police Department policies 107.0, persons in crisis, and 147, sheriff sexual harassment.
There's also one other one, I apologize, I think I sent it to you guys as well, it's for the 148, we can do that next meeting if you want. I sent you all the policies on our website for workplace violence, so the two policies that kind of go hand in hand. So I guess I'll start with the 107, persons in crisis. Obviously, this is a policy we've had in place since 2016. The most recent policy itself was drafted in consultation with mental health providers, local as well as the Department of Mental Health. The revisions that we are making to this policy really reflect changes that are within mental health in itself. So there have been in conversations with the Department of Mental Health, and specifically the mobile mental health team. And so the section that has been added in here is section 958 of the mental hygiene law, which speaks to the transport for evaluation and powers that are approved for mobile crisis teams. Previously, they mistakenly, my understanding, mistakenly using a different section, and so this is the appropriate section. So we're putting it in our policy, so our members are aware of that, of this section of law, and when we do answer a call for service with mobile mental health, we want to make sure that our officers understand why this is in place. So as far as the policy goes, in the draft, the italicized language is really directly taken from the mental hygiene law in itself. The one thing that we added in there in terms of a section related to transport for evaluation, and that the ultimate decision, the determination to make a transport is made by the agency leading us, and it's going to be based on the circumstances presented in the department at the time of the request. And the on-duty supervisor, the OIC, will may decline taking the person in custody on a mental health law if it's deemed that it would be a greater danger to the person in the police department. What I mean specifically about that is if, for example, you have an individual who's in crisis, who's in their home barricaded, doesn't present a danger to anyone but themselves. And the mental health team has deemed that their behavior reaches the threshold for an involuntary transport. We're not forcing our way into that house to arrest somebody. We're not doing that. We're not going to place our officers unnecessarily in a position where they may have to use force. So that's what that means, and it really, it goes hand in hand with the training that we continue to give our officers. We talk about violence, active violence, in our use of force training and in our policy. So we look at the totality of the circumstances. I don't wish for anybody to hurt themselves, but the last thing I want is for us to be the cause of it. If somebody in crisis hurts themselves, that's upsetting, it's tragic, and this may sound callous, but I'm more accepting of that than if we are the impetus in that. So we are going to evaluate how we take action based upon our policies and procedures, and whether or not you are engaging in this is going to create a greater likelihood for the use of force. And so that's where we're at with that, and that's why that section is in there for that reason.
Could you confer with the mental health team as far as what this approach would be?
Yeah, I mean, this isn't, it's not like I just want to clear to our people that this law authorizes mobile crisis teams to take somebody and to direct law enforcement of the ambulance service to take an individual crisis into a hospital. But I want our people to understand that we're ultimately going to determine what actions we take based upon not just this law, but our policies and our training. And specifically, is our presence escalating the situation? Are we better off, what crisis is this person in?
Wouldn't the mental health people be able to determine that?
They may be clinically able to say this person is a danger to themselves and care for themselves, but I'm not going to force a situation, or I don't want us to force a situation where we're now forcing entry into a home to take somebody on an involuntary transport. But we reach a door, that individual grabs a knife, and now we're at an escalating use of force situation. So that's why we have that in there.
But in the law that you read, the way I understood it was that the mental health people can direct the police to do something.
Meaning that they can ask us to take that individual into custody for that, right? But as far as legally requiring us, no, that it's not. They can't say you're taking this person into custody, and we have to act upon that. What it means is they have the authority to deem an individual as a unfit unable to care for themselves or endanger themselves or others. They have that authority, and when they make that determination, they can then direct us on their behalf to take an individual into custody. If when we're out at that scene, we're going to look at the totality of the circumstance, the individual, where they are, what we encounter.
The long and short of it is they can request, but you don't have to apply.
Correct.
They don't have the power.
Correct. And that's why that is in there. And we did have just that the situation at one point in time. So
Well, you described last time a situation where somebody couldn't be transported in the ambulance.
right, and whenever an individual is taken into custody, whether it be through a 941 on our behalf or a 958, we look at is there a health issue that in play as well, and so that some of that determines whether or not the ambulance is going to transport or whether it's the police department is going to transport. So all of that goes into the decision making in terms of just the transport, what method are we going to take, what danger they pose to the crew, things like that.
As far as you know, do other police departments have this exception?
I don't know. I don't know what agencies have a policy for this, and if they do, what agencies have an exception.
But this mental health law.
Correct, but not every agency has a policy for a person in crisis. I mean, this is based upon I mean, we're lucky, we have an officer who's a certified crisis intervention team trainer. He works hand in hand with mental health providers. So, you know, we lean into the officer quite a bit in terms of this. This officer also attends, is part of the Ulster County's criminal justice behavioral health team, and you know, attend meetings regularly where things, subject matter like this and other items related to substance abuse and mental health come a part of the discussion. And I would encourage you, if you have an opportunity, the county issued a report in January of this year, sequential intercept model mapping. That was a report that was issued in January, detailing a number of recommendations that they want to see move forward. It also gives a little bit of a background how sequence intercept model came into existence, and criminal justice behavioral and health advisory committee. Officer Kraus has been a member of the sequence SIM team for a while. He attends these meetings regularly in addition to his training with CIT. And actually, this section was added specifically as a result of those meetings and discussions at those meetings.
Which is countywide.
You know, we attend. I don't know what other agencies. I think the sheriff's department sends. So I don't know. I don't know any other. I know what other agencies send people to it.
So Chief, the biggest change has been this, but the ultimate determination to do so will be made by the agency and based on the circumstances presented to the department at the time of the request. The on-duty supervisor or OIC may decline to take a person in crisis into custody if they deem it to be more of a danger to the person and department members. That's the biggest change.
Well, no, the biggest change is the addition of section 958 in the policy. And
That's
explaining what,
section.
yes, what
Okay.
authority the mobile crisis team has in terms of involuntary transport. And then the section there, lowercase I is added as well. That's
That just seemed to me to be the biggest behavioral change for your officers.
it's not a behavioral change, it's what we've been doing all along. But I felt it important to, I thought it'd be important to memorialize that in the policy. It reinforces the training and where we're at and how we approach these situations. Any other questions about this particular policy? So we're gonna, you know, our next steps are kind of reviewing it with our supervisory staff, looking, just make sure there are no other issues, you know, any other concerns that we're gonna want to have addressed, and then ultimately we'll issue to the members, and we'll be responsible for reviewing and signing off on the policy change.
And Chief, can I just ask where the template for the language for this policy change came from?
The italicized section is from the mental health law.
Okay.
So from this step, how long usually to implement it into your policy?
I would anticipate issuing the revised policy to our members in the next 7 to 10 days. And then we give them an opportunity to keep that policy, they sign off on that policy. And then they're always acknowledging when they sign off, but they're always afforded the opportunity to ask any questions. And you know, we're constantly, you know, when we issue a policy, just for you all to understand, not just to say this, but there are a lot of policies we're constantly evaluating. You know, we're looking at what case law comes out in a particular matter and saying, okay, well, how does that impact what we're doing now? Are we, you know, is this, you know, is there something that came that we're seeing that is now considered best practices that we're not doing that we want to implement? We need to improve our real are doing that. You know, part of accreditation is constantly reassessing where you're at. We're not. I don't believe in complacency. I think we have to constantly be looking to see how we can better serve and how we can better prepare our officers to handle the situations that they're being asked to handle.
You want to, we can go to the next.
Any other
one.
questions on that one?
No.
Okay. And then in the sexual harassment policy, this is a policy we put in place in 2009. Really, the changes that were highlighted on there are, just because we hadn't had a policy revision in almost 4 years. So some of the languages, some of this language came directly from the town's policy, which comes from state templates for sexual harassment policy. And so we wanted to make sure that we added that so it more accurately, mirrors what the town is doing. Obviously, some language specific to, what should be, how a member should handle or what the direction would be, should definitely be made up to chief of police. And then I think the other part is really in terms of adding a section about retaliation, which is in there pretty self-explanatory. And then lastly, about the training. This is something we have to, this is an annual training that we have to complete. And so what we, in the past, we did it as a service with using media from the New York State Department of Labor. But in the last several years, the New York Mutual Insurance Reciprocal, which is the town's insurance carrier, they have an online university. And so we complete many of these trainings via online. And so the officers are told, there's nothing you have to complete this, there's a video, there's an interactive component, all these satisfy the requirements of the state, and then they take the test, and that's kept on top of us, and then also the town as well.
Just a point of information, because according to this, the date that this was issued was September 24th, 2009. So this policy is actually 14 years old.
No, there was a revision, so
Okay.
there was a revised, this was revised, if you go online, you'll see the revised policy is today, I think it was 2019 was the most recent revision prior to this. And one of the things that did come out, for example, on page 10 at the bottom, they talk about New York State Division of Human Rights. There's a paragraph in there where it talks about complaints with the DHR, that we filed in 3 years. That is highlighted, that was actually 1 year previously, now it's been 2 years, so changes to try to be in compliance. Any questions about that policy? And then workplace violence policy, same, really just trying to update it. It was another policy maybe in 18 or 19 when it was last revised. So we updated that as well to more align with what the town's overall policy is. And this is again, training is completed for this on an annual basis through the NIMR system. And we report back, so we keep record of that in the counties as well.
So I just had a quick question, because obviously the unique situation of police officers having access to firearms and tasers and that kind of stuff. I was just wondering, was there any specificity in the language regarding, the use of personal items for intimidation? I just wasn't sure if there was a caveat because the police have access to,
If I'm understanding your question correctly, if an officer is using department equipment in a way that is not authorized by the code of conduct or other section, then they would be cited for that, for violation of that.
but not necessarily of the workplace violence.
It depends, again, it can be situational, it can be both, one or both. But the idea here is that the job in itself has inherent risks. Environment of working is inherent.
But in terms of the workplace violence prevention policy, I was just
Right.
trying to drill down a little bit more, because police are in a unique situation of having access to things that can escalate a workplace situation to a more violent level.
Right, and so I think some of that goes into when we talk about being responsible, talking about risk assessment.
Yeah, I saw that.
And then the training outside of this, and but as far as being unlawful, things like that would be covered, maybe cited in this, but also covered in other sections of our policy.
Because what triggered me to ask that question was the second part of the hierarchy of controls where it says engineering controls to reduce the hazard through substitution or design, and knowing that, you know, guns have safety features, you know, that kind of stuff. I just wasn't sure how that was going to be impacted because of the nature of police having access to more violent, you know, engineering controls in nursing situation was the automatic, once you gave a needle, the needle retractor, right, that was an engineering control that protected nurses and healthcare workers. So that's why I was just wondering.
And some of those things are covered in other policies, so for example,
Other policies.
like for example, our taser, the energy license, you know, when you're testing the taser to make sure that it's working, there's a procedure that you put in place so that, you know, should there be an accident or discharge, you're not discharging at anyone. And so that's the type of engineering, I guess, with risk mitigation and you know, maybe exists in another policy to kind of go along with what you see in this particular policy.
And then my only other thing I'll say is that when policies are revised, a number of organizations put the dates that things are revised so that people can keep track of it, and I'll just throw that out there.
So that's why we put the revision date on there, and then we keep track of all of the policies. So when we revise a policy, we save the other policy. Keep it.
So that you have a historical perspective of what has been revised. Okay.
We keep track of all of our policies, and it's a policy specific to an accreditation standard. And we go to that accreditation standard, all of those policies, all revisions exist in that particular folder. So you have to be able to show and assess it. These are each of the revisions.
Okay.
So that's all I had on that particular. And instead, I think, you know, we'll, we have a staff meeting on Thursday, so I anticipate we should go all through these policy revisions for the next 10 days.
Next on the agenda, we move on to our discussion regarding the recommendations of the Reform and Reinvention Committee. I believe we left off on a couple of topics, must have been a spirited debate on one of the topics, so the last two topics that carried over was the police officers to fit the criteria of the ideal officer. Chief, do you want to elaborate on that?
So I think with this particular recommendation actually came about when we were discussing the use of force and the objective and reasonable standard and talking about the personality. So I think that was how this conversation and this recommendation initially started. And then there were multiple discussions over the reform and reinvention process in terms of officers. And so my understanding of it, you know, really what the Reform and Reinvention Committee wanted to do is to ensure that we are hiring the right people, who are going to be the types of police officers that we want in our community. How we vet them, but there was a larger discussion to this, and not just how we vet them, but how do we recruit them, and more importantly, how do we retain them once we have them? And these are, you know, this is becoming more of the retention in hiring is becoming even more of an issue since this recommendation came out. We are an extremely young agency. You know, I made notes back then, you know, 3 years ago, talking about the fact that we were going to lose over, you know, almost 250 years of policing experience within 8 years, and we're seeing it. You know, we in the last few years have lost, we lost a sergeant with almost 30 years of experience with the department. Retired to retirement. We had another sergeant with over 20 years to retire.
Chief, I just want to point out that it looks like we
We're
were
not
silent. Point out. So I don't know if it's actually recording, and I only want to make sure that we're doing that, so Haley can have accurate minutes.
Appreciate it. So, when we talk about the ideal officer,
Just jump in, having attended several interviews, I think the questions asked and the guidelines to the question are a direct fit with the recommendations for the ideal officer, that they're probing those people. Well, I was present at the interview, they were probing those people to see if they fit that criteria with stress on certain parts that were, about violence, about use of force, stuff like that. So I see a direct fit between what people are interviewed and what's described as, the officer. I'll just throw that out.
So you're saying it's a benefit?
Sorry.
You're saying it's a benefit?
Well, I think that they took, the police department took the recommendation and designed the questions of what they're looking for. And it might have been pretty much the same with some, I don't know what the original was like, but there's definitely a fit between the recommendations and the type of interview process that's done.
Right, and I think it showed how things, what the expectation of a more modern police force is in thinking and how they interact with people in the community, what their expectations when they're gonna be police officers, what they expect their role is. Even though they're young, I mean, most of them are pretty young and some of them are still in the academy or so forth. It was nice to see that, I don't know if it's a generational thing or so forth, that they're at least trying to think about those things and see their role in the community and how what a community police force should look like.
no, I think, the questions would be, let's just start, and it's one of the reasons we appreciate the fact that U.S. commissioners sit in on these interviews. We see things through our lens, the police officers, so there's a certain amount of needs of having your perspective, I think, is important, and we want to hire good officers, but then I go back to talking about how you maintain, because everyone knows when you have a good officer, and when you have a good officer, every agency is looking to,
Filter.
that officer from your agency and offer anything they possibly can. And so it's part of that discussion. And
What
so
do you think of the main reasons that people would leave our police department for another?
I think money is a huge factor, and I think directly related to the retirement system. And so, and I just think, when you're discussing, when you talk about, the defund or the reinvestment, or whatever you want to call it, that plays a role. Plays a role in the round of officers here. I'm just saying, you're asking me what causes
You're
people
saying
to
that
leave,
they-
that has caused people to leave.
Okay, that they see the community group looking to do this.
Mhm.
And they
Job
think
security.
they think it could happen and it would affect their retirement.
Correct. So there's that, there's retirement systems in and of itself, so, the newest hired police officers, their retirement is based upon their base salary. They can work overtime, but none of that counts towards their retirement. So they're looking at it and saying, okay, well, maybe I can make X number of dollars in overtime here, but if I go down to this PD in Westchester, I'm making that same amount of money in my base salary, all of which goes towards my retirement, which is.
Plus the overtime.
Well,
No, not the overtime.
But it would.
But the point is, they're looking at it saying, maybe, let's say, for example, I can make, you make $10,000 in overtime here, right? So your salary, what you're making is $10,000 more than your base salary, but they're going to a PD in Dutchess or Westchester and Rockland, where you're now looking at starting at $15,000 to $20,000 more as a base salary, all of which counts towards your retirement. So that's another, aspect at play. And so, as I said, you want to recruit good officers, and then when you hire them, you want to retain them. There's a cost. One of the reasons we moved away from part-time police officers and really moved down to a full-time model is because the return on investment, over an 8-year period, I think we spent over 300, somewhere between $350,000 on training and equipping and doing things with officers who were gone. And so, we have to look at that, or I feel it's important for me to look at that. So as far as the ideal officer goes, we want someone who understands what our ideal idea of community policing is, what we, how we approach our, how we interact with our community. We are different than many agencies in this county in how we do things. And our fit is not the fit for everybody. It's not.
How many officers do you think in the last 5 years left the force for other districts for money? Just a ballpark.
5.
And an average time they would be roughly.
4 years, 3 years.
So you feel like we're training them and then somebody else is bad man?
It happens.
That was a follow-up. The part-time officers, on average, did they say?
Some might have been a year, and the problem with part-time officers is twofold. So to give you a history of use of part-time officers. So when I was hired in the early 90s, your part-time officers were historically older. This was a second job for them. They had full-time jobs, and they were there to supplement the existing patrol. Primarily, for traffic control, parade details, and at night. Towards the end of the 1990s, in an effort to save money, the department turned towards part-time officers to cover shifts when full-timers were not available. And those officers who had second careers were basically, I don't want to use the word forced out, but they just like, I can't do this. This isn't what I can't commit to this time, to this training, and this work schedule. So we lost, and we started to then hire more young people. So our part-time officers, the demographic changed. We're now hiring new people just out of the academy. This is their first job, and what's great, we train them. Our field training program is a 12-week full-time field training program. So someone who's getting out of the academy will be working full-time hours for a 12-week period of time. And then after that, it's based upon their availability. So now all of a sudden, the availability isn't there. Or let's say, for example, they're not getting those that full-time hours. So now they're putting they've been trained by us. We have a very good field training. I know I toot my own horn, but we have an amazing field training program here. And I think we do a really good job of preparing officers. And so these officers then go out and say, okay, well, I'm going to go to the town of Lloyd with a part-time officer job there. I'm going to go to the town of Ulster or Strawberries. And so now their availability is less for us, or more often than not, we're training them now. All of a sudden, the town of Lloyd has a full-time offering, a full-time opening, and they're going to take that part-time officer. So we spend a lot of money. And between
You do the same thing. Get some part-time officers.
oh, we can, yeah, absolutely. I mean, if there's a part-time officer and we can hire, we're going to take them. They're good, as long as there's somebody we want, absolutely. So we're seeing that that's not really helping us, and so that's why we're now trying to stay with as many full-timers as we possibly can, because at least that provides that consistency.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Limited pool.
It is, I mean, we,
Are the training, the you know, the academy, is that full all the time? No.
And not everybody makes it. I mean, the academy, so you have, there's 2 academies each year for the Ulster Police Academy. One is a full-time academy, and that academy runs August through December. And that's Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, or even more hours than that. And then the part-time academy is January through July. I think it's 3 nights a week, and I think a Saturday or Sunday. The 2 people we're going to talk about later on today are in the current part-time police academy. And so we would be looking to send them to what's called phase 2, which is about 10 days, and then they would do their field training. Phase 2, between phase 2 and their field training, they would not be operational for us on their own November 1st year of this. The 3 people we hired last year, that we hired last August, Officer Stilts, Ochnick, and Garen. We interviewed them in May. They went to the police academy at the end of July. They didn't get, they were not clear to be on their own until like the 1st of this year.
And that first round of training that they do, that's on their dime, and then,
Well, it depends. If you're in phase 1, yes, if
Yeah.
you're taking phase 1.
so they're investing in that training, and then if they get hired by a department, who will cover the expenses of phase 2, and then, as you say, with the field training, what is the cost for phase 2 and the field training? And have you guys,
About $20,000
okay,
For us.
per officer. Yeah, I totally agree with the recommendation, and as I said, you know, just trying to, I think it's more art than science, and just trying to figure out who really understands what we want at our police office, what our expectations are. My expectations as the chief of police are different than many of my colleagues in this county. I consider it a bleeding heart. Bride, but you know, it's okay. Any other questions about that particular recommendation?
Not for me.
I did have just one question, because I have participated in some of the interviews. How long have you guys been, or has the department been using that set of questions for the interviews?
So we always use standard, but the use of the new the questions in terms of diversity, equity, inclusion, since the reform reinvention committee. So I think we started that before the recommendations came out. So I want to say the end of 20, beginning of 21, you know, before their final report. You know, they made those suggestions and we incorporated it right away.
I think that that's something that should be acknowledged in terms of revising the interview process that you participate in, and the expectations of candidates during that.
Previous to the police commission, it was just, they went to be like town board and police yourself and Scott. Those people.
Sometimes,
Civilians.
no, sometimes town members, town board members as, town board members sitting in commission citizens, sometimes it's supervisory staff. That's why I said I'm happy to all participate in that. It gives us
So now that those additions have been included in your questionnaire, you've seen them now for the past 3 years with the candidates, do you see a difference in reaction of the candidates, or something that you might have, because you weren't typically asking that, but now that they said something in response to that, you're not necessarily comfortable with that person?
off the top of my head, no, there's nothing that. No one has said, no one has responded to those questions in a way that has, you know, raised a flag for me. You know, usually there are the responses to other questions that, you know, will kind of get an impression that maybe this person doesn't understand the type of police work that we want. You know, it's not gonna be a good fit, and that's, you know, that's sometimes what this comes down to, right? You know, I like the questions that we ask because I think it sends a message to the individual candidates that this is what, these are what's the things that are important to us. It's the reason, you know, our oath of office, if you've ever heard the swearing in of a police officer, the oath of office that, you know, that they use, that the town clerk uses. Remain, better reflect what, you know, what our priorities are and who we are. So, but it's hard, like I say, sometimes I think it's more art than science, and for me, I can only look at it through my experiences, and that's why I mean, when I say it, I would like that we all sit in on those things.
One point I did not make for the public, this is on page 35 of the recommendations, what we were just discussing. So the second topic that we were going to discuss today, which is found on page 38 of the recommendations, is officers' interaction with civilians, and specifically providing business cards.
Again, something that, you know, we've been doing, had a right to know policy in place since July of 2020. Officers are interacting with someone where doesn't result in the issuance of an appearance ticket, an arrest report, an accident report, or something that, you know, we want the officers to obviously state the reason why that, you know, that interaction took place, and we want to provide a business card. So, you know, our sergeants cast it regularly reviewing body worn camera video. And that is part of it, to make sure that that's being done. We ask that our officers know this as well in their reports, and there's some supplementals, which, you know, they'll do. Overall, I think, you know, our department does this, you know. If someone's not getting a card, it's the exception, not the rule. You know, I see that because just the body camera reviews that I review, that the sergeants review, and the number of business cards that we're having at work.
I was just gonna say, there's quality assurance,
Well, it might be-
right? Know how many.
Might be girls at the bar.
I hope they're not doing that.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
I hope they're not doing that, but overall, I think there is an acceptance of it and an understanding that this is important. And like anything else, you know, I would say, and I'm just as guilty of it as police officers, we hate two things, change the way things are, you know, like, so, you know, do I think that, you know, it took some getting used to, absolutely, but I think now it's second nature, than the cameras, you know, I think our officers, no one wants to go out on the street anymore without a camera, you know, and that's the position. So I think, you know, there is compliance with this, and you know, I would encourage you all anytime you want to look at videos, see for yourselves. And as I said, you know, an officer makes a traffic stop, we want to, you know, state their name, show you why they're stopping that, and why that vehicle traffic stop is taking place. You know, and then you'll move on to interaction from there. And as I said, it's not, doesn't result in a traffic summons with the individual officer's name, badge number, identifying information that we should have in that business card. And really, I think overall, our officers hanging out, most of their interactions, you know. But again, I encourage you to come in and videos as well.
Anyone else have any further questions? Chief, you're ready, we did monthly report.
Okay.
I have a point of information, because the monthly report is 42 pages long.
Okay.
Is there a way of kind of getting through the highlights, since I just want to do a time check because it's already 8:01. So I didn't know if there was an opportunity for you to just highlight the selling points, since it becomes part of the record anyway.
I mean, you have personnel issues. You want to discuss.
We have some stuff talk about an executive session.
Right, and I,
Can we do executive session first and then come back to the? report?
Someone wants to move to
Yeah, and we-
modify the order.
Just in case, I think that's more important to get to.
Whatever you want.
I'd like to move to executive session to discuss personal issues.
Second. All in favor?
Okay.
Anyone opposed? No, that's it. Okay, so we're gonna go into executive session. Move back.
Pause, see. Keep the
What time?
8:23. Back in.
Thank you.
Make a motion.
Are we in? Okay. We make a motion to come out of executive session?
I did.
Okay, and a second? All right, we're back from executive session. It's now 8:23 PM. I would say that the action table would go, I lost my. The agenda. Coincide with the next item on the agenda. Which is when I get to that part of the agenda. Forward to the town board for approval of the hiring of Conrad Gonzalez and Yasmin Cabrera as full-time police officers.
And second that.
And anyone opposed? I guess then we can go back and go to monthly report, chief.
Thank you.
The clerks.
So, monthly report, on my cover sheet, you'll see we had one complaint against personnel. There were 4 calls for service involving officer defensive action and 1 commendation. And also a new patrol vehicle placed into service to replace 345.
Do you want to put the combination on the record?
Yeah, I'll get down.
All right.
Yeah, absolutely, I'll definitely do that. So let's see, and just in there, just to highlight, the Ulster County, my report was the Ulster County Police Chiefs Awards that were on May 24th. So we had 2 cases that were recognized by the Ulster County Police Chiefs Association, one from 2021 and one from 2022. 2021 was a team life-saving case that involved our agency, the Sheriff's Department, the State Police, and the Ulster County Department of Emergency Management. With a suicidal subject who had potentially taken medication, tried to commit suicide on the rail trail. Had second thoughts and ended up calling their parents who contacted us and we were able to locate that individual to that. So officers, it was a team award in our agency involved Sergeant James, Lieutenant Butler, former officer John Town, and Sergeant Hugo. And then in 2022, a case involving our agency and state police, life-saving team award related to a messy situation involving a knife and the actions of the officers in that case. So, our agency, former Sergeant Keith Lewis, Officer John Miller, Officer Tyler White, and Sergeant James. No, I'm sorry. Officer Eric Bernhardson involved in that for our agency. And then Officer White was also recognized by us to kind of stop the DWI issue as well. So we had 1 commendation for the month. It was for Officer Kraus. Received as a thank you. Officer Kraus on patrol back on May 16th, and there was some debris in the roadway. Fell off a passing truck. And, so Officer Kraus stopped, assisted traffic control, so the operator could clean up the debris in the roadway. And just wanted to thank Officer Kraus for helping out with the traffic and making his job a little bit easier cleaning up the roadway. As I said, we had 4 calls for service involving officer defensive action, and a total of 9 reports. So I'll kind of go through those. The first incident is from May 12th, 2023. In this particular case, there were 2 reports filed. Same individual for 1 individual. The person in this case is was a 34-year-old female, approximately 5 feet 2 inches tall, 130 pounds, small build, white, non-Hispanic. This was assisted with the New York State Police, who ended up charging this individual with driving while intoxicated, resisting arrest, and obstruction. government administration, amongst others. The officers have responded to requests to assist the state trooper who had a vehicle stopped in the parking lot of the local gas station, 270 Main Street. The operator of the vehicle had actually attempted to flee the trooper before our officers had arrived. The trooper contacted, requested assistance via radio, and two of our officers responded. While trooper was handling the running data on the vehicle and on the operator's driver's license, this individual attempted to leave again, this time in the presence of our two officers, who ultimately tried to stop the individual, tried pulling away from the officers. They were directed down to the ground where they were handcuffed. So you have two reports. And in the first report, the officers, again, all documenting physical compliance, a takedown. Here, one officer in their narrative attempted to, as they did, was trying to walk away and began actively resisting. They used a leg sweep and were able to physically direct them to the ground. While on the ground, they used a headwind to maintain control while the individual was being handcuffed. The other officer's defensive action report was involved was that there they attempted to stop the individual from moving by putting their arm out, grabbing them. That individual began pulling away. Ultimately, the officer and the defendant, in this case, fell down to the ground as a result of the leg sweep from the other officer. And when they were down to the ground, this officer used an arm bar to gain control of the individual's right arm so that they could be handcuffed. The defendant in this case was handcuffed and then turned over to the state police for processing. Started responding to the scene and interviewed troopers, the officers, and the defendant in this case. Based upon a review of this matter, the officers' actions were found to be in compliance with department policy and training. Are there any questions on that, Mr. Forrest? The next defensive action report is from May 23rd, 2023, about 9:20 in the morning. This took place at 401 Main Street. The defendant in this case is a 39-year-old male, approximately 5 feet 9 inches tall, 160 pounds. Small build, white, non-Hispanic, charged with 2 counts of criminal mischief, larceny, and possession of burglary tools. The ODAR is documenting the holstering and display of taser to take the individual into custody. So in this case, the officer was on patrol, observed this individual on a bicycle in the area of 410 Main Street. The officer knew that there were 2 active arrest warrants for this individual stemming from another case. The officer attempted to engage the individual in dialogue and to take him into custody. The defendant fled on a bicycle. The officer followed the vehicle. Ultimately, the defendant in this case got off the bike, attempted to flee on foot. The officer got out of their vehicle, holstered their taser, and directed the individual, verbally directed the individual down the ground. They were handcuffed and then taken into custody. Criminal missions were for the criminal missions burglary tools were for the active arrest warrants, and the larceny was actually the bike. And the crime charge for possession of small private bike that he had was stolen.
And the officer and officers of taser, did they say in a picture of the taser, something like that, did they warn the person? I mean, it seems that the person just stopped.
In this case, I don't know, you just do it down. As far as, the deployment of the taser, yeah, we want the officer to say, you know, taser, or even if they just say taser, taser, and we do that in training, not just to the individual, so that your colleagues and anyone else who's involved in that arrest know that the taser's out, and the taser's being deployed, so that they're aware of it as well. So in this case, you know, we looked at the videos, body camera videos, from the officer, as well as, some of the car camera video. Based upon the investigation, the officer actually didn't form policy, but there were corrective action. One of the things that the sergeant noted was that the officer should have advised the individual that he was under arrest, you know, right away. It may have caused him not to run, you know, flee on the blanket issue. And, you know, engaging in dialogue, and as he's getting, you know, he's talking to him, the guy just ends up taking off, and the sergeant said, you have to, you know, the rest of them stop, you know, and so that may have mitigated that. The second, when he gets out and pursues him, then he tells him he's under arrest, and he's getting out of the car to get down the ground, and the rest of the rest, but just the fact that, maybe at the outset of that encounter, so that was something that was, documented in the professional training file as well. This next case. This next incident occurred on May 26, 2023 at about 11:55 in the evening near 84 Main Street. The defendant in this case is a 36-year-old male, 5 feet 11 inches tall, 209 pounds, large build, white and Hispanic. He's charged with 2 counts of harassment in the second degree. Both of these reports are documenting physical compliance techniques and taking the individual down to the ground. In this particular case, officers are on patrol. They get flagged down by staff members from McGillicuddy's about an individual who had deployed pepper spray inside the bar. The officers see the individual who allegedly discharged the pepper spray, and as they're getting ready to speak with him, this individual walks around the officer's car. There's one of the staff members is talking to the officer. This individual walks around the car and then hits and punches that staff member in the face. Officer exits the vehicle. Another officer, who's also walking up to the scene, sees this. They grab this individual and they, with the assistance of the bar staff, get this guy down to the ground where they end up handcuffing him. He was in process and released on appearance taking charged for 2 counts of harassment. One for deploying the pepper spray, and then the other for the striking of the staff member that was observed by the officers.
Call that, that's not assault, so,
Harassment,
yeah.
it's assault as far as penal law is if there's physical injury, if an individual sustains physical injury.
So punching in the face is not injury.
In this particular case, the level of injury doesn't sustain the charge of assault. Potentially, you could look at it, maybe you could assault third, but certainly not, it wouldn't reach the level of assault.
Somebody in places, ones that don't break that notice, get harassment.
You know, you have, I mean, I know you're joking, but there's statutory law and there's case law. I learned this when I was in secretary. Years ago, I investigated a case where an individual was punched and they got hit so hard that it completely fractured their orbital, their jawline, and severely injured them. When we charged this individual with assault second, and ultimately what we were told from the DA's office at the time is that one punch doesn't show an intent on the individual to inflict serious physical injury. You said that was serious physical injury. One punch doesn't show intent to inflict serious physical injury. So the law is, the statutory law and there's case law. So, but in this particular case, you have 2 defensive action reports. The first report the officers, documenting how they grabbed this individual's arms, and along with the security staff were able to get them down onto the ground, and then handcuff them. And the second officer, their report is documented pretty much the same action.
And what about the civilian action? Is that a problem?
Yes and no, in the sense that we tell our patrol officers, you have to be cognizant of who's there and what they're doing and how they're, what quote unquote assistance they're giving, because you are responsible for that. So it's not something we, we encourage. And what we tell the officers, should the staff member become involved in that, you want to make sure that they're not doing anything that they shouldn't be doing. And if they are, then we will have to take an action as a result of that. And in this particular case, the officers, were aware of that and, minimize the amount of time or the amount of assistance that was used to take this individual into custody. The last incident of call for service, there are 4 reports filed with this. The individual in this particular case is this incident, occurred on May 27th, 2023, at about 5:55 in the morning at the station. The individual volunteered, a 24-year-old female, approximately 5 feet 6 inches tall, 200 pounds, large build, black, Hispanic, in charged with DWI, common law, DWI, with the BAC, and as well as some vehicle traffic violations. In all 4 of these reports are documenting restraints. So I'll kind of give a little synopsis and then go into each of the reports. So in this particular case, the officers have responded to a reported personal injury automobile accident, ultimately taking the operator vehicle into custody for DWI. This person was brought back to the station for processing. They were in the processing room. They had finished taking a breath sample for their BAC. They were completing some paperwork, and this individual ended up, lack of better terms, having a mental health crisis or a mental health breakdown, and began to bang their head against the wall into the processing room. They were really upset, and the initial arresting officer stepped in, and so the first offensive action report, first report is from the initial arresting officer, documenting the placing of their hands behind the head and trying to stop this individual from banging their head onto the wall. And the person continued to flail and kick out. So the officer at another point in time used their body weight to hold down the legs. Rescue squad was contacted. We were able to, the officers were able to get this individual on the stretcher, and assisted rescue with securing them to the stretcher for transport to the hospital. The individual was, an obvious crisis, and so really what the officers were trying to do was to minimize the amount of injury that this individual was inflicting upon themselves.
So the laceration to the forehead was from the striking on the wall.
From the wall and from the floor. At one point in time, they slid down onto the floor and they're kind of laying down, and so the individual bangs their head down onto the floor itself. So you have another officer who is documenting in here about placing their head on the side of their head to try to prevent her from, this is when they were down on the floor, trying to prevent her from lifting her head back up, hitting it onto the floor, from injuring themselves further, and also noting and documenting the pinning of the legs on the stretcher so that they could try to get this individual secured on the stretcher. Third report is for one of the other officers who was in there to help try and restrain this individual. This particular officer actually was holding on to the arm that they were trying to get her back onto the bench because they were afraid that when she had gone down to the ground, she was pulling on the arm that was cut to the bench to try and prevent her from dislocating that shoulder, and also documenting grabbing her legs while they were loading her onto the stretcher, and holding her so that she could be secured to the stretcher. And then the last defensive action report is for the officer who assisted, so the ambulance would get this individual into the ambulance, they start the transport, and they get to the intersection of Park Corner and 299 and they call for assistance. We already had an officer in there, that officer called for another officer to come in and assist, because the individual was kicking and fighting the EMS workers. So, second officer responded, again, restraining her, holding her down, so the EMTs could use triangular bandages to secure her to the bench for transport to the hospital. And to ultimately return over to the hospital staff for evaluation. So,
And the photos that were taken were as a result of the injury?
the photos were to document, the injuries of the individual. Yep.
Because it was clearer on the fourth report where the officer said it was self-inflicted laceration to the forehead, so
Yeah.
that for quality assurance thing, that might be something to consider adding. Because it wasn't until that fourth report that I could see that it was self-inflicted.
All right, I'll look at that. Yeah, absolutely. Any questions? Any further questions about this?
No.
So, the only other thing I wanted to highlight, and a couple of things in the monthly report that I wanted to highlight, were related to the training report. The fact that, Officer Miller attended the crisis intervention team training instructor, training trainer, course up in Syracuse, 40-hour course. Where we were lucky to get him in. People USA actually pays for the lodging and for the course. So the organization that does crisis does this. This isn't one of 3 courses Officer Miller will have to complete before he's fully certified to teach crisis intervention team training. So that again is a process, and we're starting that now with this Bill Kraus, who is our current instructor. He's going to retire from here probably. So we want to make sure that we have someone else who can do this. And John was expressing interest, and he's doing a really good job with that. So this is one of just so you all aware, that's one of 3 trainings he has to attend before he's fully certified to do anything CIT instructor.
When would be the next training?
It depends. So he needs to complete it's some sort of, it's a mental health training for like law enforcement. I forget the specific title, but the crazy part is I looked online, because DC, the Department of Criminal Justice Services has training accounts. You can see various training. So I knew about this training. I kept checking because they said there was a training, I think it was in Westchester County, and I kept trying to register, but the button to select Westchester was never available. I emailed them and they're like, no, the tape was already full. And I go back and it never opened it up. They're like, yes, no, it was already full. So there's a component of that maybe in the fall, like in Nassau, Suffolk County, but I don't know if that's feasible. But then John also needs to complete instructor development course, which is it's a training to be a general topics instructor. So those are the 2 courses he still has to complete.
Does he have to do it in particular order?
Ideally, and it's funny, normally you would be IEC certified before you got to the CIT. So we were able to get him his spot in CIT because we have a relationship with the instructors who put these courses on the state. Phil Cross in particular, and we kind of said to them, we want to continue this program. You got to have you got to give us some allowances. This is somebody who, the trainings will always fall neatly into that order that you want. And so they accommodated that. And so we were really thankful about that. But again, that's, I think, a testament to the relationships that Phil has established in his positions. So it's good. And then May 8th and 9th, we conducted 2 deliveries of our medical recertification and our CIT refresher, safety communications refresher at the station.
And I know because I was at one of them.
Yep, Lieutenant Butler and Officer Kraus handled that, and Officer Miller did a little bit of instruction with that as well. In-house, you can use him and continue to teach with Lieutenant Butler, so it was good, getting a little taste of that. And Officer Milton attended and graduated from the police bicycle patrol training course that was started. So he's actually out and about, and you'll see him out on bike patrol here and there. Yeah. And that's really all I had, and that's of course for highlights, unless you all have questions about anything else that we're needing for.
Does anyone else have any concerns about that?
No, I make a motion to accept the report as written.
All in favor? Does anyone else want to add anything else to, because we don't have anything else on the agenda? Not,
If I could just say one quick thing, I apologize, I did see the email from Tom that sent yesterday. As far as the police commission is concerned, if you want to meet with people with mental health or any of them, please let me know. Trish Tuber and members of our mobile mental health team addressed the police commission, I believe town board active police commission, with this, we talked about some of these recommendations early on. She is retired, but I certainly can reach out to Laura Altieri to see if she can attend the meeting to discuss or answer any questions you may have about the mobile mental health team and the relationship and the working relationship that we have with them, and so.
I think that actually.
Yeah, I think that'd be a great idea.
You let me know when, and I can, if it's something you want to do for next meeting, next month, I can certainly, reach out to Laura and see, try to schedule that, but, let me know.
Okay, but see if we can make sure we have more, most of our members here. Okay. Time,
8:50 according to that.
is 8:50 and move to adjourn.
And second?
All in favor?
Aye.
When is the next meeting in the summer?
It's